vector-borne transmission and risk groups. And then you would have also heard some lectures related to the vectors. So, as far as vector-borne diseases are concerned, it's a global picture. It accounts for around 17% of all infectious diseases, causing more than 700,000 deaths annually. It could be either by the pathogen, could be either parasites, bacteria, or viruses. And as far as malaria is concerned, you all know that it's transmitted by Anopheline mosquitoes. We have 6 primary vectors. There are a couple of secondary vectors too. But then the global estimate is 219 million cases, and reporting more than 400,000 deaths every year. And most of these deaths occur in children under the age of 5, and it's basically mainly in Africa. And then the next most important vector-borne disease is dengue, it's a prevalent viral infection transmitted by Aedes mosquitoes. Of late, the burden is too high, and then we know around 3.9 billion people in over 129 countries are at risk, and estimated around 96 million symptomatic cases. And these are all global picture. And then we have other viral diseases as far as India is concerned. We have chikungunya. Of late, we also have reported Zika. And then a couple of cases have been reported recently. Also, there was a case reported in defense recently. A few months back, there were cases in Kerala, and then also in Pune, one case was reported. And JE is there throughout almost a few cases. The prevalence has declined, but still JE cases are there in some pockets, in some rural areas. But the vectors could be found in urban areas also, that I will be talking about it as when the environmental factors are concerned. And we don't have, we haven't, we don't have any reported yellow fever, but then tick-borne infections are also there. And as we all know, many of these vector-borne diseases are preventable through protective measures, by intervention measures, community mobilization, and then drugs targeting this infectious disease, which we could bring down the cases. As you all know about this triage, and then vector, pathogen, the host, and then you have environment taking a major role. The vectors, the infection, for the disease transmission to happen, normally it happens in susceptible population, but then also in areas where infections, most of the attacks episodes used to happen recurrently. And it could be the vectors. There are many factors involved in the vectors, which plays a major role for its survival. That is the microclimatic conditions, which I talked last week. The lifespan of the vectors should be more than more than the extrinsic incubation period for the transmission to happen. And also the reproduction, depending on the blood field, and then egg laying, and then the gonotrophic cycle which happens, and then the breeding patterns. It could breed in convenient or the habitats which are preferred. Like you all know that the breeding habitats as far as Anopheles are concerned are clear breeding habitats. Unlike some vectors in other countries like Africa, where you find breeding also in turbid waters. Biting behavior also plays a major role, because the biting behavior is nocturnal, unlike Aedes mosquito, which is diurnal in nature. This nocturnal biting habit also changed depending on the exposure to the human beings. So we find, normally we used to hear about outdoor biting, where the mosquitoes would be active during the first quarter of the night, that is 6 to 9 p.m., where people are all moving around, and then you find people mostly an active phase. Many of them will be outside walking or doing jogging, or then active, and then your the sweat and the exhalation of carbon dioxide attracts mosquitoes, and they get biting. You will not be knowing it, since you will be active doing some work. That outdoor biting is also observed in some places now. And then the pathogen, for the pathogen to survive, it needs specific conducive conditions. for the the parasite to travel. And you all know about different. The host plays a major role as far as the transmission is concerned. The replication, whether it's a parasite or viral, and the replication, and then these are the major thing. And vectors and the conducive environment plays a major role. Okay, coming to an important factor that is known as environmental factors. There are many aspects in environment, because that's the reason I thought I'll speak first on the environment. We all know that deforestation plays a major role in so many infectious diseases, including some zoonotic diseases. Deforestation first leads to the vegetation, the fringe areas, the vegetation will be changed. As a result, this is mainly because of the human settlements, and human settlements are always in together with the livestock movement. You will find livestock also along with human settlement in these areas. The livestock includes cattle population, and also these cattle population be there, and that results in human settlement in the forest fringe areas. uh, Indicates that the people will be moving towards the forest for forest wood, either for forest wood, for honey, or other products, and they get exposed to the mosquito vectors. So you get, especially in the case of malaria, you get forest fringe areas, especially in northeast areas. You have vectors, minimus, and other vectors in the forest fringe areas. So in these areas, since it is a fringe vector, so once people venture into the forest, you get into contact with these mosquitoes, and then they bite, and the transmission happen. Whereas some vectors, like especially Dirus group, you find in the deep forest, and also Freebacillus in the fertile areas adjacent to forest areas, you find the vector transmission happening. And this deforestation also leads to creation of new ecological niches favorable for vector proliferation. The recent thing is, because of deforestation in the northeast, Anopheles culici faces a major vector as far as malaria is concerned. Now has been reported in the forest fringe areas of northeast area. So this is something which has, due to deforestation, the landscape changes, which has favored the proliferation of Anopheles culici. And also water puddles in deforested land. It also, the soil profile and the water quality will vary, which favors the breeding of certain Anopheles species. So depending on the habitat, you find new vectors. And you also find increased malaria transfer deforestation due to altered habitats, vector abundance, and also the biting of the susceptible population who are in the forest fringe areas. Another thing, as far as the environment is concerned, is agriculture and animal husbandry, and the increase in farmlands, farm animals, whether it's cattle, any cattle, pig, or cows, or whatever it is. This allows the feeding options for the vectors, and vectors will bite this, and this we call them as zoophagic in nature, because and its preference to these animals, its zoophilia is high, because they get bitten fast, because they will not be having, they are always exposed, and the cattle population is too high for the vectors to find conducive blood feeding and throughout the night. And also this animal agriculture, animal husbandry results in potential reservoir host, especially in viral infections, especially in JE, Japanese encephalitis. The pigs also plays, pigs, and then the migratory birds play a major role in the transmission of the infection. And this changes in the land cover also because of the microclimatic conditions, like the reclamation of lands, marshland, into any used purpose. That the habitat will change, the microclimatic conditions will change, and they'll be exposed. That the increased risk for malaria transmission would be more. And then you have the other projects are the water and the irrigational projects. This is for the irrigational purpose. We have dams and canals, and most of these dams are standing water canals. You find when the water is running, probably you may not find breeding, but then when the flow is receding, and then you find water collection in these canals. This attracts breeding of Anopheles cultivars as well as Stephen's eye mosquitoes, and this has been observed in North India, and especially in Thar Desert area and Sardar Sarovar project. You find the breeding of Anopheles Stephen's eye and crucifixes, which leads to the because of this construction of the dams and the canals brings in tropical aggregation of labor where the parasite load is more, and then the vector is also there. So from the endemic area, once people come there, though the transmission happens. So this is a major issue in areas where irrigation projects are there, unless a proper method to clear the water habitats is done once in a week, then this may lead to water stagnation and mosquito-breeding conditions. Also, settlers, people who are settling in the on the banks of these areas or the adjacent areas, they bring an infection to the community and who might have little or no immunity at all. So they are vulnerable as far as the malaria is concerned or any vector-borne disease is concerned. So especially like Aedes-borne breeding, also intermittent rains also plays a major role. Another major aspect is urbanization. Urbanization is shrinkage of as I said last week, rural area, and then expansion of the urban areas. We know that there is an area called urban, and then the peri-urban areas gets expanded, and these peri-urban areas shrinks down the rural areas. So, and then you will find the urban and peri-urban areas, as in many metropolitan cities, you find development of concrete jungles. Then the major breeding habitats would be the water storage containers and all. So this expansion of major cities also encroaching the neighboring population environment, increase exposure to vectors and non-vectors also, non-human hosts also. And many such cases have been observed, especially some of the JE cases are also reported in urban areas because of large water sheet collection after rains, and then you find breeding of Culex vicinity group mosquitoes. And this urbanization also leads to solid and liquid waste generation, leading to habitat degradation, habitat deterioration, as well as pollution of the environment. Migrants, we all know that people for mega construction projects and then flyover construction, migrants are coming from endemic areas, and they lack immunity to prevalent endemic areas. They also, in other words, they also bring in infections, and with the vectors, they can, it can spread infections. And this urbanization also brings in new pathogens and vectors to the red settles location. You find many new vectors invading or many pathogens invading this. That's because of tropical aggregation of labor and from endemic areas. That's the one. And then as the population increase in urbanized area, you find inadequate non-clearance of water collection in standard in unused containers and discarded habitats, especially after rains, which facilitate mosquito breeding, especially the Aedes mosquito breeding, because inadequate source reduction, because there are places where source reduction can be taken, we can do source reduction, but in some areas like in discarded habitats, there will be a lot of discarded materials where the manpower will not be sufficient to tackle it. So this results in the abundance of Aedes mosquitoes, leading to dengue, chikungunya, and Zika fever. But then Zika is not much, but then dengue, chikungunya cases are more. We also have biodiversity loss because threats to biodiversity, either in the form of depletion of ozone depletion or introduction of new invasive species. Invasive in the sense is non-native species that I will be explaining in the next point. And then we know that global warming also is playing a role. The temperate areas during summer season, when it was not conducive because of global warming, you have breeding and then unusual rains during some part of the year where we used to get breeding habitats, and that results in proliferation of mosquitoes. And it also sometimes, habitat degradation also plays a major role in as due to the biodiversity loss. And reduction in global diversity is likely to contribute to vector-borne disease. Definitely, the global biodiversity in biodiverse areas. Now you find that the diverse vector population also, but then when this is affected, we find diseases also, that especially in we find in the forest fringe areas, many of the diseases that like KFD and other diseases are being the cycle, the enzootic cycle is becoming epizootic, and then transmission of infections. And another aspect is introduction of invasive species. The recent example, we all know about Aedes albopictus in America, and then now it has been, after chick fever in 2006, a lot of cases were reported in India, and we found that in some places, in addition to Aedes aegypti, Aedes albopictus was also incriminated as vector. And now the recent one is Anopheles stephensii, urban malaria vector, the invasion in many areas. We found in the beginning of 2010, it was reported from the Horn of Africa, Djibouti, and then of late it has been reported in many parts of Africa, like Ethiopia, Uganda, and also these places, in addition to the existing vector, which is Anopheles gambiae, this particular vector is creating havoc. We don't know the role about this. Such invasive species would be an issue in future. So we really don't know why it has invaded in some places. So that is not known. But then it could be due to migratory migration, because unlike in the case of Aedes albopictus or Aedes mosquitoes, there are drought-resistant eggs. But then this could be due to travel or and if these vectors venture to other areas, urban malaria, with the man-made breeding habitats, it could create a big havoc in this. Macro and macro climate changes. I just talked about the global warming and all. That is basically a macro change. Microclimatic changes which happen in a specific locality. The temperature, all these parameters plays a major role as the vector, and especially for parasite, the temperature plays a major role. So, and the vectors, all these things play a major role in the transmission of the infections. So when we link all these, factors, we could see that climate change as major. It has got a different aspect. We get data from the regional weather stations, and you know that because of climate change, heat waves, extreme weather conditions, whether it's cold or hot conditions. So these temperature, the minor changes or whatever changes happening, has played a major role in the vector proliferation and the disease transmission potential. And there are also the transmission dynamics also change. And in ecosystem also you find the breeding vector proliferation, and also plays a role in the socioeconomics and demographic pattern, and these are all linked. And then when you see the health effects, you will find the diseases due to temperature related illness and mortality. Extreme weather also could lead to health impacts on human population. Air pollution, degradation of the air quality, and suspended particulate matter. So that can lead to respiratory infections, and then of course water and waterborne diseases, especially after the monsoon and post-monsoon. We also all these are linked to vector-borne infections because of water stagnation and leading to vector breeding, and then it has an impact on the food and water shortage. So all these things are interlinked. So any changes in the environment, macro, micro, it is going to affect the vector and the environment, so that transmission can play a major role. This is based on a publication which has happened in 2000. There are direct effects of climate change. So, as far as malaria is concerned, the abundance of animal reservoir or arthropod vectors, temperature may play a major role. The rusting habitats. For the parasite, it plays a major role for the extrinsic incubation period. It enhances temperature, enhanced transmission because of increase in temperature, and then the mosquito should survive long enough to transmit the infection. And the importation of vectors, especially Aedes vectors, dengue vectors, and to Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus, and then also the pathogens, and also increase in animal risk and potential human risk. So these are the direct effects on climate change. So which is an important aspect as far as environment is concerned. Next one. So you have the effect, temperature effects on vectors. So as I said, vector helps in the survival. The decrease and increase in temperature depends depending on the species, and changes the susceptibility of the vectors to some pathogens depending on the temperature condition, because there are optimal temperature conditions, vector population growth, the feeding rate, the hello, and the host contact. So these vectors, temperature plays a major role in the vector proliferation. And also, as I said, in the pathogen, as I said, extrinsic incubation period, temperature plays a major role, disease transmission, and also in the geographical distribution of pathogen, limited places, temperature plays a role. And as far as viral infections concerned, the temperature also plays in the decrease or increase in viral replication. Next one. Yeah, vectors. So again, coming to the precipitation, rainfall, what it plays on the vector. So increased rain may increase larval habitats, uh, and but then intermittent rains play a major role in the transmission, because you find water stagnation and then you find suddenly a sunny day, so you will get more transmission. But then excessive rain can drain off these habitats, but at the same time, post monsoon, you find the flooding of water leads to large water sheets and then transmission. Low rainfall can create habitat as reservoir dry pools, like you find riverbed pools creating mosquito condition and vectors like Anopheles culiaceae breeding in these riverbed pools. Decreased rain can lead to water scarcity, therefore water storage practices. Heavy rainfall can also synchronize with the vector host seeking and virus transmission. So that also plays, heavy rainfall can also place to the seeking, more and more vectors would be there, so that would be seeking host. And humidity, because of rain, the relative humidity will be more. That helps the vector survival, and also this is more linked. And as far as pathogen is concerned, the few direct, but some data on humidity effects on malaria parasite development. That is because of the temperature during rainfall, the temperature will be less, so it affects the parasite development. So, and then the vector and the host seasonality, vector-borne zoonosis mainly maintained by the wildlife, and you find events are relevant to their ecology. But then, in the forest fringe areas, especially when we are talking about the simian Malarian parasites like Plasmodium knowlesi, which has been reported in Southeast Asia. Now it has come up to Myanmar, and recently a few cases have been reported from Malaysia. So knowlesi, and it needs the transmission. It happens in animal cycle through pigtailed and lion-tailed macaques, but then this close transmission cycle, sometimes when human beings venture to the forest, then it gets bitten by the mosquitoes, so forest vectors, and then you find transmission of from the animal to human being. But as of now, human to human transmission has not been reported in these simian parasites. Therefore, malaria elimination strategies will have only 4 human parasites. These are the Vivax falciparum and Ovalia and malaria. But then there are other simian parasites also playing a role now mostly in Southeast Asia, Sanomolgi, then Inui, and then in South America you have Plasmodium gallinaceum and Plasmodium senior. So these zoonotic infections, as far as malaria is concerned, is also playing a role. There are zoonotic infections, also other infectious diseases, whether it's viral or other infections. But then when you venture to the forest habitation, when you venture more into the habitation, then and where animal cycle is happening or where animal population is there, then you are likely to get infected with some infections of them. Also, that vectors and hosts also are subject to seasonal variations. You know that climate-related temperature plays a major role. The day length, the daily temperature range, everything plays a major role. Seasonal variations also you find depending on the uh, rainy dates, whether summer, winter, or monsoon period, and all vector seasonality is dependent mainly on the temperature, environmental factors, and also demographic processes like many reproduction, birth, and mortality rates by weather, and indirectly by resource ability. So we need to have the the manpower and other things for surveillance and other mechanism, which I'm coming to. Okay, so coming to the climatic impacts, you have these, as I said, human vectors, host vector, pathogen, environment. So the vulnerable population are the children, and then the pregnant women, a very susceptible population, and the environment in a way it plays major in precipitation, temperature, humidity. Pathogen, as far as malaria is concerned, plasmodium, and the vector is there. So these are all interlinked for the transmission, disease transmission, and any changes in that so will play. So sometimes we may ask that one of these things are there, especially if you take vectors. Vectors could be there, but the parasite load is not there. Then the transmission of infection will be less, even though the abundance is more. It has to find. I mean, it has to bite infected person to transmit the infection. So these aspects are all interlinked. And for malaria elimination strategies, I mean, one has to be very careful to eliminate even the last parasite from the population. So this is another thing which I want to bring to your knowledge. I mean, water scarcity. We have crisis of crisis and due to global warming, and you see in community well, many people are trying to fetch water to get even a vessel of water, and there are many mechanisms. I mean, the water causes water scarcity, leading to water storage and infection, and you will find collection of water from tankers or construction of canals or deep wells to irrigation wells to fetch water, and water will not be sufficient. And then also this, excessive heat can lead to mortality, and then you find water scarcity. So water will not be there to drink, and then that is another crisis, environmental crisis, which is linked with malaria transmission and especially and also viral transmission. So I mean, if you see off late, I mean, there are quite a few floods, in many parts of the country. And recently, you found, the environmental degradation and also flood in Kerala, and then in north we have seen in northern part of UP and all recently floods and affecting the population. So these droughts and followed by then. And then flood due to global warming and climate change has a major drawback and has been has a major impact on the vector population and the disease transmission also. I just wanted to show you a few snapshots of what all has happened of late in our country. Next one, please. Yeah. So I mean, you have health impacts also, flood, immediate deaths and injuries, and then you also have infectious disease. So we are targeting more on vector-borne diseases. So you find vectors breeding even, and especially in large watersheds, you find, in addition to the vectors which transmit malaria and dengue, you find sometimes during large watersheds other mosquito vectors like Reductive group, Tritonurungus breeding in large watersheds. Thereby, these vectors would be available would be prevalent in the city area, and then diseases also due to this vectors can transmit. So and it affects the indirectly also many human health system. So this is one aspect of health impacts of flood, which is also associated with the vector borne diseases. Yeah, coming to dengue, I mean, we've been talking about malaria. Dengue climate variability also plays a major role in dengue incidence and transmission. So temperature plays a major role in the vector breeding and development. So you have temperature